Hi, this is Estelle Erasmus, your host for Freelance Writing Direct. In this short, soundbite-filled podcast, I'll cover everything the freelance and creative writer and author needs to do to move forward with their writing, their creativity, and their career. Through conversations with guests, we'll cover tips, tricks, and actionable strategies. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes and Spotify. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. And today we're going to talk about how to be a media-friendly author taught by Paula Rizzo. And I'm so happy to have Paula here with us today. And a little bit about Paula. She is a speaker. She's a productivity expert. She's an author of Listful Thinking and Listful Living. And she's an Emmy Award-winning producer, media trainer. She teaches with LinkedIn Learning, and she's an instructor, and she has courses on her website. I'm going to share all that information. And Paula and I know each other through our mutual agent, Rita Rosencrantz. That's right. And this is Rose. I should introduce Rose, my hobbies. So anyway, Paula and I met at the Writer's Digest conference, and we both also are members of the Women's Media Group. So it was so wonderful to spend time with Paula, and I'm so happy that she's here today because we have so much to talk about. There are so many authors who want to be able to speak on the media, to maybe even create their own media. And there's so many questions I have about it. And you're an expert. So let's get right into it. And it's great to have you here, Paula.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
I love this topic, and you speak very widely about it. First of all, what do you feel that authors don't know about dealing with the media?
A lot of times authors will think that they will do media when the book comes out. And that, I always say, is too late. It's never too late, but it's a little too late, okay? Because you should definitely be engaging with the media well before your book comes out. And that's because you want to make sure that you feel comfortable speaking in front of the camera or being interviewed. And you also want members of the media to know you so that when you do have a book that's coming out, it's easy for them to say yes. If you're an unknown person, it's more difficult. And I spent, close to 2 decades as a television producer in local and national news in New York City. And often I would have experts who, I knew for years before they had a book. And then when they had a book come out, I'd be like, sure, you're great. We love you. We'd love to have you on. It just makes it a lot easier.
That is so helpful because we talk about being media friendly, but what does that really mean to be media friendly?
It is at a drop of a hat. If they called you, you would be ready to go because it might happen. You never know. The media is a very tricky medium where they will reach out to you. Breaking news is happening or something very interesting happens in your world and they look for you. They find you on Amazon, they Google you and they ask you, could you comment about this or that? And it breaks my heart when people say no, because the truth of the matter is, if you say no and a media member reaches out to you, you may never hear from them again because they've moved on. They found someone else who could do that job for them, right? And who could save the day and answer those questions. And then that becomes their go-to person for that topic. So you could lose your spot there. So I always want people to be media ready before they think they need it, so that if something pops up, you don't feel anxious. You already know, this is what I'll wear. This is how I'll do my hair. This is what I'm going to say. And so you're really prepped beforehand.
No, I love that. Because I was media trained when I was magazine editor-in-chief, and I was media trained several times because I would appear on television shows in the 90s and the early aughts and on talk shows like Ricky Lake, remember her?
Yeah.
And Wanda Watts and Gordon Elliott, all these now gone to the green room in the sky programs. But the media training, and I share some of these tips in my book, Writing That Gets Noticed, But one of the things is that, you should have your talking points, and we'll talk more about that, and that you should wear bold colors, no black, no patterns, because it could be a little crazy with the camera. What other media friendly talking points and or advice can you share for authors that are just like, yeah, I need to do that?
Yes. Well, I think you do need to start doing it before you think you need to, because you want to start hearing what the words sound like out loud. You think, oh, I'll be great. Let them ask me some questions. And then you ramble the whole way through. So it'd be better if you even just started recording yourself, just answering a few questions. Why did you write your book? I have a freebie that I put together for authors, the 10 questions that every author needs to answer, because there are questions that will come up again and again. And so you need to be able to say those in a succinct way where you feel like, hey, it doesn't matter what comes at me, I'll know exactly what to say.
So practice makes perfect.
It really does. It really is helpful. And being able to watch yourself, I think, is very difficult. So as a media trainer, I make all of my clients do videos and then we watch them together. No one else may see those videos at first, right? It's just for us, just to get comfortable. But this really does help, because then you get to see your tendencies too. You get to see, oh, do I say a lot? Or do I say like? Or do I have a weird thing where I'm looking off camera, or I do this weird thing with my eyebrows? You wouldn't know that unless you watch the videos.
That's so true. Even when I first started with the podcast, I realized I would say the words, a
Huh.
lot.
Yeah.
And I became very cognizant of that. I would watch myself, and now I don't think I say it as much. I think there's still times when I do, but it is much more of a conscious effort because I know what my little stumbling block would.
Yeah, it's just noticing. I think that's the biggest thing, is to notice about yourself. And then that way you feel more comfortable to stop doing it if it's something that you don't want to do anymore.
So what if somebody freezes on camera? Like they're just very nervous types, maybe. They're a lot of writers are introverts. Let's face
Yes.
it. I'm not, I'm an extrovert, but a lot of writers are, they don't want to be in front of the camera, and they have to because
Yeah.
it's part of the promotional effort, but they may just freeze. It reminds me of that Friends episode where Chandler, I think, was trying to smile every time
Yeah.
with the camera. He was like,
Yeah. So awkward.
how do you give advice to an author who perhaps is worried about freezing on camera?
Yes. Well, it is about first trying and doing it and changing the story that you have about video and about doing media. A lot of times, the issue is that the author thinks it's about them. And it's not actually about you as the author, it's about your audience. So it's about reframing how you feel about video and how you feel about doing media. A lot of times, authors think it's about them. And so the spotlight, of course, is on you. I get it. You're the one talking about your book. But if you reframe your thinking around, how can I be of service to the audience? How can what I'm saying, the knowledge that I know, change someone's life? When you think about it that way, it really takes the spotlight off you and puts it onto the audience. So you go into the mode of helper, right? I'm here to help. I'm here to put out information that I wish I had had, or, I know more about than anybody else. And so it'd be great if people knew this. When you sort of change that perspective, it does help. You still need to practice and you still need to work on all the things we talked about, but changing your perspective and your mindset around it does wonderful things.
It's sort of like that old tenet that if you are shy, it's really more about you. And if you focus on the other person, so it's taking that and flipping it in the professional setting. I think
Exactly.
that's great advice. What other advice would you give, and do you give to your clients, for somebody who wants to get a message out about what they've written about?
Yeah. Well, because writers are used to writing and not used to speaking, I do always tell my clients to write a list of frequently asked questions. So what are the questions that you would like to be asked? Let's say if a member of the media wanted to talk about your book. So you can write out all the answers, because that's how we feel comfortable. So you could write out all the answers and look at them. And then from there, be able to say, how can I make this more impactful if I was speaking? So the difference here is that when you're giving interviews and you're speaking, you really want to start with the most impactful, important thing up front, as opposed to when you're writing and you sort of conclude with something that will be the big conclusion. That's the opposite of how we speak in TV media and broadcast media. So it's a little bit of flipping that so that you can make sure that you have the biggest impact right in the beginning. It's what I call the accordion method.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. So the accordion method, I created it to help authors and experts be able to talk about what they know in a succinct and clear way. And it's so that you have a short, a medium, and a long answer to anything that you're asked. So, for instance, if I'm talking about my book and someone says, "Hey, why did you write a book about lists?" My short answer is, "Lists changed my life." I'm able to go in and give you something, very impactful to say, "Hey, this was a big deal for me. Lists changed my life." And then I can go into talking about how I was sort of disorganized and how I use lists to get more organized. And maybe I give a tip or two about, how I use lists every day or something like that. And usually the tendency is to then at the end say, "Lists really changed my life." But instead, I'm saying take that and stick it at the beginning so that it's like a headline.
I love that. And also with TV, things are short, the segments are
Yeah,
short. So if you say it up front, the most important, if you get cut off, you've still shared that message. And so
exactly.
the audience is hearing what you want them to hear in the way that you want them to hear it. That's great. I love the accordion method. That's brilliant. Do you recommend, and I sort of know what you're going to say, that authors get media training or some sort of training?
Yeah, I do, because I think it's one of those things that you don't think that you need to practice this part of the promotion, but it's so important because you want the audience to fall in love with you as the author, so that if they see you, it's almost like it doesn't matter what the book is about. They like you, they're interested in you, you've convinced them, whatever she wrote, I want to check it out. And that's the position you want to be in so that they really engage with you and they follow you. Hopefully this is a writing career that you'll have for a long time. So you want people to follow you and buy anything that you're selling.
True. There are people now who are coming out with books, and they're so controversial.
Hmm.
They're going to be put on the spot when they're interviewed on camera and maybe led into saying things that they don't want to say, that could be too controversial, that could potentially affect sales. So if a newscaster, let's just say, is trying to lead you down, you've written a political book or you've written a book about something about motherhood, what advice would you give for them to steer the narrative
Hmm.
back to where they want it to be? Let's say they wrote a book about something political and the TV newscaster is saying, "Oh, well, one can think from what you wrote that you're also," and then just take it into a big different direction.
Yes.
How would they pull the narrative back? Because I think that's such an important part of media training.
Yes, for sure. And knowing, okay, what are the potential questions that could come up that will be uncomfortable, that might happen. So really looking at your topic from every angle to say, how could someone maybe criticize this? Or how could somebody maybe have a problem with this or whatever? And then have those lists of questions so that you're ready for it before it happens in case it does happen. But the key here is to steer away from the thing you don't want to talk about by talking about something you do want to talk about. So you don't want to be rude and you don't want to like not answer or ignore whatever it is that they're saying. So
Right.
you could give them a little bit, say a little bit of something, and then we pivot, and then we go into the thing that we do want to talk about. Here's what I do know. This is the same thing for if they ask you a question you don't know the answer to, right? So like, let's say they want to know specifically what is the percentage of whatever that's, and you have no idea. You should really be able to say, well, it is a significant number. If in fact you think it is a significant number, you should never say something that you don't think, but you can say something like that to get around not knowing the exact number. So you could say, well, it is significant. And what I do know is, and then you go into something else that you did want to talk about, one of your other talking points, and kind of lead that conversation into
Right.
where you want it to go. But you need to have those talking points in your mind before you go into the interview. So
When I
that's part of this too.
Yeah, absolutely. When I would go on a talk show, like even like Good Morning America or Fox News, I
Sure.
would have my 5 or 3 to 5 talking points. And if somebody said something in a direction I didn't want to go in, I would say, "Oh, that's really interesting. But what I really want to point out is," and I would
Mhm.
pull it back. And so I acknowledge them. It's kind of like I did the nod and now
Yep.
I'm coming back, that kind of,
Exactly. But you always want to have those key points so that
yeah.
you do have somewhere to go with it, right? So you're not just along for the ride and figured, oh, well, whatever they ask me, we'll just see what happens.
Right. It's really like everything in life. Preparation
Yeah,
is 99% of it. Like really, and I think you've said this before in some of your other talks, making sure that if you're going to be on a podcast, look at a few episodes of the podcast.
for
If
sure.
you're going to be talking about publishing in a magazine, make sure you understand what the magazine has covered. And if
Yeah.
you're going to be on a TV show, have watched some of the TV shows so that you can actually, even if you're not speaking to it, you kind of know the lay of the land, which is so important.
Yeah, for sure. Because so often people will say, oh, I want to be on the Today Show or I want to watch GMA. I want to be on GMA. And I'll say, do you even watch those shows? Do you know what kind of books they cover? They may never do that kind of topic.
Yeah. Now talk to me about, we talked about the accordion method. Now talk to me about sound bites, because
Uh-huh.
today's day of so much noise and breaking through the noise, which is a lot of what my book is about, talking about breaking through with writing,
Yeah.
but this is speaking, getting these sound bites. How do you do that? Do you create these sound bites beforehand and have them ready to go, and knowing that they're going to be pithy and that they're going to be used? Or
Yeah.
do you trust yourself to like do improv while you're
Part of it is that you should have some improbabilities because you never know, right? Like, so it is a
yes,
little bit of both. It's a little bit of preparation and really knowing, okay, this is the type of thing I want to say, but I
yeah,
never want you to memorize it. Because if you memorize, this can be a slippery slope. Because if you start to not say it exactly the way you remembered that you were supposed to say it, then you could have a downward spiral and tumble. And this is terrible. Even reporters and anchors never memorize when they're doing, live programming and things like that. It's always sort of, here's the bullet points of what I think, and let me just talk about that. So even if you're practicing and you say it a different way every time, I'm fine with that as long as, you don't feel like you're stumbling. So a little bit of improv is good, but also sort of having those core messages of what you want to say clear. But the accordion method is the thing that really helps you to create those sound bites so that you do have a very clear and succinct way to say it.
that's great. And I want to segue to something that I feel is tangentially related. You have it, right? When you're presenting and talking, I see something that's not tangible with you, but I feel it. And people have said they feel that for me when I'm
Mm.
speaking. And I bet you know what I'm talking about. What am I talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it's like charisma and energy, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Talk talk to me about energy, because there are authors, and maybe it's the introverts, not to, I love introverts. Most of my best friends are introverts because it's a nice balance, but
Totally.
sometimes the energy could be a little muted, just
Yes.
the way they are. But what do you recommend in these situations?
And it's different when you're speaking in front of a group where you're feeding off their energy. So that's really nice because you get to see, oh, are people resonating with what I'm saying? You can see their faces. Are they smiling? Are they interested? So you can feed off of that. If you're doing an interview, the same thing. You have a host with you. You're able to see, are they interested? When you're doing videos or you're by yourself, it's difficult because it's just you in a room by yourself and you have to keep that energy going, right? Or over Zoom or, whatever it is, sometimes you can lose some of that energy. So the way that I always tell people to keep the energy levels up is to remember this is a performance in a way, right? Like this is always a bit of a presentation, even if you're doing a Zoom call, and to also fill the room with the sound of your voice. So this was some advice that I was given a long time ago by a wonderful director and producer who said, just to keep your energy levels up, fill the room with the sound of your voice. Think about being in a room by yourself. Can you fill it with your voice? And that will actually help you to sustain your energy so that you're not whispering and you're not, a little bit too timid. It really does help for you to project in that way.
That's really interesting. And I studied voice. I studied opera for years. So
Ah,
it's almost like this diaphragmatic training, letting
mhm.
that sound come out, which also kind of opens you up and lets
Yes.
the energy. I love that. So we talked about sound bites, we talked about the accordion method. Let's talk about a little bit more nitty gritty. What do people need when they're dealing with the media? Do they have to have a press kit? And what are the elements in the press kit that are absolutely essential to have?
As a producer, I never really cared about the press kit. I know there's a lot of energy that goes into, creating a press kit with your bio and your headshots and things like that and maybe some FAQs. I mean, you should have that. But don't think that that's your pitch. Because if you just send, "Hey, here's my book and here's my press kit," as a producer, I don't care. It's like, great. There's a million other people who have books and who have press kits. What is the idea? That I'm much more interested in is what are the ideas and the things that you can pitch or the stories you can talk about. And a lot of that comes from your sound bites, right? So the sound bites and the ideas that you have, being able to use those as pitches. And then being able to show, of course, you want to have, a headshot or whatever it is. You don't want to be scrambling for these things, but that's not. I don't think that's the first thing out of the gate that you need to send if you're going to be pitching media. I think it's more important to hook them with the ideas or the story, and then have that sort of as a supplemental thing. But also, if you're pitching TV, let's say, or video, have some video of yourself. Make sure that you have that. And it doesn't have to be traditional media. It can be a podcast interview where you were recorded or something like that so they could see you on camera. But it's really important to have those media clips there. I think the media clips and that kind of credibility is even more important than having all of the press kit stuff.
Can somebody use, let's say they don't have a podcast, if they have a TikTok account, could they use TikTok to
Yeah,
show?
just anything showing you on camera, if it's
Yeah.
LinkedIn, if it's whatever, just being able to show that you're able to say something on camera. They'll see what you look like. A producer can tell in, 10 seconds whether or not they want to book you.
And if you're pitching, like, where would somebody get a listing of all the producers? Is there a one compendium, like a red book or
How
something?
nice if that existed, but no, it does not. So it's producers are a little bit harder to find than, as magazine editors, they have the masthead. And so it's nice you can see their bylines. Often, the producers are sort of like the ghost writers, and you won't necessarily know who's who because they won't be listed anywhere. But obviously, LinkedIn is always a good place to look. Not all producers are on LinkedIn or care about it. I always loved it when I was a producer, but LinkedIn is a good place. Now, sometimes you can go on the websites for the actual news organizations and find at least people's names, or just call. I know it's crazy, but if you call and you ask, "Who is the producer for such and such show that I could pitch an idea to?" they'll tell you. It's not like the old days where they didn't want to give you any information or anybody's email address. The producers want to hear from you. And I think that's something that a lot of times experts don't realize, that the producers, the editors, they need you. They need new stories. They need new experts. And so they're hoping that you have something really interesting to share.
Wow, that is really interesting. And in any area, in any genre of, let's say, self-help or in that area?
Yes, for sure. Absolutely.
Probably fiction would be harder.
Fiction is harder, but I've media trained a lot of fiction authors and poets, and it is a little bit more difficult, but it can be done. And thinking about beyond just the book being new and the book being the pitch, that
Right.
doesn't last very long. That lasts for, 5 minutes. That's not a long life there. So thinking beyond, what else can you teach? What else do you know? If you're a fiction author, what are the themes in the book? What are the things that are there that's, something that might be a trend? Or you can talk about being a writer. How did you do this? How were you able to get published? How were you're an expert in so many things that you don't even realize. Jodi Picoult does a great job as a fiction author. All of her books are timely and have to do with things that are in the news. So she does get a lot of media coverage. I mean, now all her books are being banned, so there's that too. But even prior to all of this happening,
Yes.
she was always in the news. Like if there was a school shooting or something, she has a book about that. She was able to talk about the trend. So looking to the themes in your book too, to say, okay, how could I use this as a way to speak to the media? There's somebody who I media trained years ago who had a fiction book that came out, and it was all about the Christmas letter. And the Christmas letter of writing this letter to your family about all the things your family has done. And it's like boastful in this way. And so she was doing a lot of media about teaching people the right way to do the Christmas letter, since everyone in her book was doing it the wrong way.
Oh, that's so interesting. I guess throwing any kind of tenet or ways that people do something on its side and changing
Exactly.
it is something that could be very appealing. Very
Mhm.
interesting. So you wrote the books, Listful Living, Listful Thinking. And it's interesting because I was looking at Listful Living and I thought, well, I make lists, but I make really interesting kind of lists. So I keep my notes app in my computer. I put tons of things in there that I kind of go back and I search with one word, like idea for novel, and then I'll
Sure.
find something. But what I've been doing, and I want to get your take on this, is I was realizing that the day would be gone and I'd be like, I did so much, but what did I do? So now I make a list, I date it with today's date, and I would say something like emailed Paula to get bio, or thanked John for the conference, or reached out to, and I would write everything as I remembered that I did.
Mhm.
Worked with 3 students for Writer's Digest class, set up new class for NYU. And it's not like I look back every day, but I think it gives me a feeling of accomplishment. What is your take on doing that kind of a list?
That is the done list. So that is the list of things that I have done. And I think it's so important because so often at the end of the day, you look back and you say, oh, I didn't get anything done today. I didn't get to do anything. And then when you sit down and you actually make that list and you say, you know what? I'm pretty accomplished. Look at all of these things. I think we have a warped perception of what productivity is and what actually, doing things really truly means. So I love that. I think it's a great, unique list to make, especially if you're feeling a little bit like, oh, I'm not doing enough.
Paula, this has been great information. This is so helpful. Where can people find you and what is next for you?
Well, you can find me on social media, of course, Paula Rizzo. I have a freebie for authors. If you go to paularizzo.com/10Q, you can grab that. And that is the 10 media questions every author needs to answer. And then I'm actually working on fiction myself. So I have a manuscript that I've been working on for, 4 years. And I am in the end, the editing and editing and editing part. And so it's been very fun to sort of look at things from a different perspective, because I love lists, of course, and I loved writing books about lists because I could make an outline and then just write those chapters. And for me, it was a very easy way to do it. And fiction is not like that. So I'm definitely using different parts of my brain.
I bet you can't wait till you have your list and you're like, done.
Yes, exactly.
That's great. So thank you so much for being a guest. It's really been a pleasure having you.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm glad we got to chat.
So am I. And everyone, so much more happening with Freelance Writing Direct. And you can find me on Substack now at estelleserasmus.substack.com. And we are celebrating 1 year of Freelance Writing Direct. So check it out for more. Bye. Follow me at estelleserasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.